Hello, everyone. Welcome to Artists in Conversation, an online series with the Yale Center for British Art. My name is Phillip Edward Spradley, and I have the privilege of being in conversation with the painter Sarah Ball. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this program will be recorded. Your camera and sound are muted and will remain so throughout the program. We will be using the Q&A feature located on your navigational bar to gather questions for Sarah, and they will be answered at the end of the program should we have time. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time. If you'd like closed captioning, a live transcript is available by clicking on the icon on your navigational bar. Sarah Ball was born in Yorkshire, England in 1965. She earned her bachelor's from Newport Art College in Newport, Wales. After her bachelor's, she then went on to continue her education and earn a master's in fine art at Bath Spa University in Bath, England. She currently lives and works southwest of the UK in Cornwall. Sarah's work often explores themes of identity, memory, and the nuances of personal narratives, reflecting deep engagement with her subjects. She's creating compelling portraits of distinctive people. She challenges traditional notions of representation in painted portraiture and allows viewers to meet individuals who possess qualities that are unique and even captivate attention. Her current subjects are predominantly read as androgynous or gender nonconforming. Though outwardly different, these individuals have a spirit, a style, a vibe that Sarah finds enchanting. She feels such a strong compulsion to share these individuals with others by commemorating them and their encounters through painted portraits. Sarah's style blends realism with a painterly quality, allowing for both emotional depth and technical precision. She often employs layered techniques and vibrant colors, creating portraits that resonate with the viewer on a personal level. The people depicted may look familiar or like people you'd want to know. Her interest in the interplay between the physical and psychological aspects of her subjects enables her to convey complex stories throughout her art. Sarah's work is held in the collection of the British Museum, Grace Museum, Hepworth Wakefield, Histofus Museum, Kunstmuseum Bond, and Long Museum, just to name a few. Her recent solo exhibitions have been with her represented gallery, Stephen Freeman Gallery, in London, 2022, and in New York, 2024. Sarah has an upcoming solo exhibition at the Long Latty Foundation in Shanghai, China, that is scheduled for September 2025. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction.
Of course. Thank you so
And
much for taking time away from painting to be with us.
it's a pleasure, but also just to say thank you to Yale Centre for British Art for inviting me to chat with you today. And also, Philip, thank you for coming all the way down to Cornwall to visit my studio earlier this year.
That was an absolute pleasure, honestly. I will be coming back, so don't worry. Well, I thought we would start off our discussion by talking about some of your earlier paintings, because you and I have discussed, they are deeply connected to the work that you have been creating most recently. And so to start that, I guess we have to talk about your process. And a lot of that has to do with photography. It's a central role in your creative process. For years, you've utilized photographs of people as references for your paintings. Can you reflect on the origins of your interest in archival photography and how these images and the individuals captured within them inspired you to make painting within the genre of portraiture?
Yeah, I mean, I have a vast collection of photographic portraits that I've literally found in, junk shops or at collectors' fairs, things like that. It's something I've been collecting for many years. For me, I guess it's the idea that you might find something that was once quite precious to somebody and is now somehow disconnected from that person and ends up in in a fair, a flea market or something like that. The idea that a photograph just captures a short snippet of someone's life that as a stranger you pick up and wonder what the rest of that person's life was or is, or what happened to them or their family or whatever. So for me, that's always been a really fascinating source of inspiration. And for the sort of the very first way that I started making work from those was when I came across some Bertillon cards in a collector's fair. So Bertillon cards are the sort of forerunner to a mugshot, really. They were the invention of a man called Alphonse Bertillon, who was a French criminologist in the late 1800s, and he devised a filing system to literally note down measurements and characteristics of people that had been arrested for various reasons. And so with the photographs, there was a sort of a front-on portrait and a side-on portrait. And they'd also note down any details like scars or tattoos, or they take measurements of the bridge of the nose, the depth of the forehead, the shape of the ear. All of this was written down. So these cards are fascinating sort of little mementos of a person's life, really. And so I sort of began making work from those for what I then called the Accused series, because not everybody was found guilty. They were just, so this sort of filing system enabled the sort of cross-referencing between different states to be able to identify people that had been arrested for various reasons.
Right. And as you said, Alphonse Bertillon, he was a police officer and a biometrics researcher. And I think those photographs range from late 19th century through mid 20th century. And essentially, when these individuals lived, there was heavy discussion in the interest of biometrics, physiognomy. In essence, certain people thought that good people looked good and bad people looked bad. And I think this is a very famous example, or a famous early example of you working with photographs for your series, The Accused. This particular work is Activist 2013.
Yeah.
This is about 13 by 18 centimeters for 5 by 7 inches.
Yeah. I mean, I think it felt really important that the work of these is very small. It sort of reflects the idea of working from a very tiny photograph, really. So that's why they're this scale. I mean, I think the idea of taking the measurements, it was sort of, a little bit later, Francis Galton sort of worked with photographs of prisoners, and he was trying to make links between facial characteristics, basically, and criminal tendencies, which not good, but
some would say problematic.
Very, very problematic. I mean, the Bertillon cards didn't really last very long. I mean, as I say, they're the forerunner of the mugshot, but they didn't really last very long because, fingerprinting soon became a much quicker way of recording people that had been arrested. So
here's another example. This is unknown. Do not necessarily know what this person was taking their mugshot for. This is also from 2013.
Yeah.
And in a similar way of working, you went on from photographs of identity cards, documenting people who had come to America through Ellis Island. And that series is in fact called The Immigrants.
Yes.
And I remember in our earlier discussions, the term immigrant was something you noticed that was being thrown around a lot during Brexit in a very particular way, so to say. Is that weaponizing of the word during that time what interests you to find photographs of certain immigrants and create that series?
Yes, it was. I mean, I felt that the word and the notion of immigration was really hijacked and used as a sort of a way of panicking people to, you know,
Mm,
to make the wrong decisions, really. And it was something that the media got on, and the Brexiteers were really keen to use, and it sort of made a mass panic, really. Um,
right.
and
Fear mongering, as it were.
yeah, exactly. Around the same time, I actually found a book of photographs, published book. The photographs are by Augustus Sherman, and he was a clerk at Ellis Island, who
Mm,
was also an amateur photographer, and he was in charge of registering people who came through Ellis Island as part of the, you know, voluntary migration scheme. And um, so he would be sort of meeting people and registering them as they went through the, the offices and things. But at the same
mm,
time, he would often photograph them. And so this book, I found this beautiful book of photographs, which seemed the opposite of what I was listening to in Britain. It was very celebratory, and um, the photographs are really moving, actually. And there's the front of the book is an essay by an author called Peter Meisenholler, and he had written an essay for the book. I contacted him, and he very kindly sent me some examples of extra photographs that weren't included in the book, but that he had access to. So I
fantastic.
was able to make work from all of those. But incredibly moving photographs, really. There's a lot of the people would change into their national dress as they
Hmm.
neared Ellis Island. I think really because those clothes were their best clothes and they wanted to make a good impression. Um, but I was able to read sort of further on in the book that in the essay that often they would um, cast off these clothes after they'd got through because
Mm,
they literally didn't want to stand out. They wanted to fit into the society there. So yeah, so very interesting. So a lot of the people who are photographed are in their traditional clothing.
right, as we can see here with the Czech Slovak,
Yeah,
this is from 2015, and this is very, um, as you said, traditional garb that someone probably would have come straight off the boat, as it were, with it.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, yeah,
and it's interesting because Frederick Sherman, he was a clerk there for 30 years, so he probably saw thousands of
yes,
people.
yeah,
And the photographs are, again, family groups, individuals who are
yeah,
detained for medical reasons or for further interrogation. But I say this because for some time, you focus on people featured in photographs that were captioned for like a fraction of a second for
yeah,
official and governmental purposes. Click next. And what I appreciate about your restaging, reinvestigation, re-representing these portraits from your series, The Accused and the Immigrants, is that it's the beginnings of your portraiture and it's connected again to the work that you're doing today, and that you've invited us to reconsider how we look at people through a contemporary lens. Um, So, how did contemporary portraiture become a subject matter of interest? Can you discuss this transition from previously working with archived photographs from a very particular era to the photographs you work with today? In what way did you begin and whom did you start with?
yeah. I mean, I think I'd worked with several different historical archives and sort of beginning to feel that I really needed to make work that spoke to today.
Mhm.
So work that meant something to now, really. And I was beginning to find this historical archives quite restricting in a way. And I think it sort of coincided at the time my children were in their early 20s and mid 20s. And it felt really important for me to make work that spoke to them and of them. And it sort of really felt like I needed to explore the world today more. My daughter is queer, and our family extends out into a wonderful and wide, diverse community. And so I began to look to them, to my family, and to their generation to make work now. I felt that I really wanted that my inspiration was to reflect on their generation, really.
As I mentioned earlier in the introduction, you're clearly not painting anyone with any judgment or in a negative light. It's a personal endeavor. It's a gut instinct in which you find these people, whether they were the archival photos or the contemporary portraiture that you're doing today, you find their features, their style, their accessories fascinating. They have a strong sense of self, and you admire and are inspired by these individuals. Um, was there a bit of a trial and error with approaching people? I know that you had some exposure to a younger generation through your kids, but then you started utilizing Instagram, um, and then went on to do street casting. And I was always curious, did it come naturally to ask and encounter? Did you have to rehearse a script of what you would say and what the end result was for? I'm sure people were curious of why you wanted to utilize their likeness.
Yes, trial and error is a good description, really. I'm yeah, I did find it quite hard to approach people, but I find really that sort of approaching people on social media was, some people just didn't even reply, so that was, that's fine, that's fair enough. But most people were quite positive about the idea, and so I'd always gain permission to use their photographs.
Mhm.
Obviously very important to do that, and to let them know how the work might be made, might be shown, and where it was likely to travel to. So that was fine. Street casting, I was really nervous to begin with. I spent ages, just painted Erasmus, and I met him in the V&A at the Chanel exhibition, and followed him around for about half an hour before I could pluck up courage for him to actually to ask if I could paint him. So I took his photograph there and then, yeah, no, it's something that I've grown to be able to do with more confidence, and it's yeah, it's great. It's fine now. So, but I used to have a little card that had a printing of me with the painting, because people didn't necessarily know the work, and so
Great.
it was a good way of sort of saying this is what I'm likely to do, and explaining that the work isn't a photographic reproduction of them. It is more about a feeling, or a mood, or whatever. So yeah.
Did you see anyone today?
Sorry?
Did you see anyone today?
No, not today.
All right, maybe later on then.
Yeah.
Um, is there a certain time when you were looking for something specific? You're actively looking for that something particular, and are these people around you? Do you engage by traveling to certain areas? Um, how do you go about finding them?
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't purposely go out looking for people.
Hmm.
Find It's funny that sort of people will link. So I might find somebody on Instagram who I then find somebody through them. Or actually, it's quite surprising how many of the people I paint actually know each other anyway, or are connected on Instagram or something like that. So that's sort of a happy accident in a way. But I'm always finding people interesting. I find myself staring at people, which is, you know, I think sometimes they must wonder what I'm looking at. But um, yeah, no, it's just happened upon. I met two people at the bus stop the other day who were terrific and exciting and amazing looking, and so I'm going to be painting them in the future. And it's just those happy
Fantastic.
chances really that come along. So
Right. You have to really have your attention, your head up and looking around, really.
yeah, I'm always doing that.
Well, your paintings are very laborious, and there's this very recurring element of the soft application and touch, which I find very appropriate because you are working with people. And this sort of interaction requires a soft touch, care, trust, and attention. And you do have recurring subjects that you have made portraits of. I think Elliot, who we're looking at right now, is the most famous example to date. I imagine you grow with these people as time goes on and you both change during these sessions. Do you typically see or hope to have longevity with participants?
Yeah, I think that's something that's really you'd sort of imagine making people finding people on social media that you don't have that connection, but actually I really do have a great connection with a lot of people I paint.
Mm,
Um, and people like Elliot here, who was the very first person I painted. These are small paintings, but I painted them on a large scale. Um, and they're constantly changing their appearance. So it's like a constant um, source of material, really, for me. Yeah, and it's wonderful. We keep in touch.
well, I do love seeing how Elliot has changed over the years. Here's another great example that is actually from 2020.
Right.
And there is a scale change at this point. Those two previous images were 15 by 20 centimeters, so a little larger than 5 by 7 inches. And this particular image is 100 by 100 centimeters, so 39 by 39 inches, um, which I think is fascinating in terms of scale shift over the course of a year, but also the quality of your brushwork has changed as well. And those two previous portraits of Eliot were with boards or panels. And in the
Yeah.
last few years, you've been utilizing linen. And I'm curious of what linen provides that you perhaps were not able to achieve the same effect with panel.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the smaller works on panel, it sort of felt like um, that I was using those works to sort of almost illustrate an idea. And I was desperate for more of a freedom to explore, almost the formal language of paint, really, in a way. And so these are sort of these slightly larger paintings, those very tentative explorations, really, of working on a different surface and using the paint in a very different way. I was sort of the soft brushwork that you talk about. It's something that people often comment about in the work, really, that there's no obvious marks, and I think sometimes that's seen as quite a negative thing, but actually it's not something I do on purpose. I'm not striving for that. It's just that my natural way of working is very much to sort of work with the surface. I'm obsessed with the figure-ground relationship. And so
Right.
the sort of this particular painting is made on a very, very fine linen with a gesso ground, which I've sort of stopped using now. But but I, just intrigued by the idea of the softness that this can give, and the more recent paintings I'm making are on a very different linen. It's an unbleached linen with no gesso, and that really enables. We've got examples of this later to show you, but the really enables me to really sort of work with the surface. So the work is sort of poured into it, or it feels like it is almost staining the linen. So I'm working with that much more aware of it as a surface, really. But yeah, this is a very tentative upscaling of the work.
Right. And I know you just mentioned it's not necessarily brushwork. You use a very subtle sfumato technique and blend colors, whether it's with a cloth, rag, whatever you want to call it, or
Yeah,
like your hands themselves. So
yeah, yeah.
I wonder, with this change of technique, how do you feel that the emotional impact has altered in the piece? Again, that like softness that I guess is commented on every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, I do think I think I'm not really interested in creating an a particular. I'm not striving for a likeness. So in that way,
Hmm.
it's sort of removed from a lot of portrait painting in a way. But it's about creating a feeling, or extending on that snippet of photograph that is the start of the work. So for me, it's about that growth, but the softness is, again, it is to do with that figure ground. So, the ground colors are sort of based on the flesh tones, and the
Hmm.
flesh sort of almost melts into that ground. Um, it's sort of more apparent, I think, in the more recent work. But yeah, so I mean, the freedom that I've got now, having moved away from the very small works on panels, is it's brilliant. It just really does allow me to explore that formal language of painting.
Certainly love watching you explore. Um, and this is another Elliot from 2020.
Yeah,
This one is of a different scale as well. This is 160 by 160 centimeters.
yeah,
So
yeah,
63 by 63 inches, another gradual scale. Um, which brings us to this Elliot from 2021. Um, this is 160 by 200 centimeters, so 63 by 78 inches. And again, it's been fascinating to watch this particular Elliot change over the few years that we've been introduced to them. And I bring this up because your first exhibition with Stephen Freeman Gallery featured paintings of androgynous subjects with strong identities. Um, what was it about this particular exhibition and approach to portraiture that you felt was a turning point for you?
yeah. I mean, I think that the idea of identity is always at the core of my work, and it's I guess it's those fundamental existential questions that we ask of ourselves. Who are we? Where do we fit in? And how much of our inner selves do we make visible, really?
Mhm.
Um, and the idea of androgyny isn't anything new. This felt like a very autobiographical body of work for me. I've always, you know, been connected to youth culture, and music was a
Mhm.
big thing for me as a young woman and growing up in the 60s. So I have had amazing musical backdrop to my life so far, with sort of Bowie and certain influences, amazing women influences like Chrissy Hynde and Polystyrene and Pauline Black and
X-ray
Susan
specs.
Boyle.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of those things. So this for me felt like it was looking at today, and but sort of delving down into my own sort of experience of growing up really and being this age. So yeah, I think the thing about androgyny is that I see gender expression as a sliding scale almost, and we all find our
Mhm.
place somewhere on that sliding scale.
Of course. Well, here we have Masha, Declan, and Prudence.
Yeah.
And I saw this exhibition in London,
Uh,
and these paintings are larger than life. And they're slightly pared back in terms of the previous work we just looked at, in terms of the emphasis on the accessories of clothing that previous paintings had. This particular exhibition, there's so much emphasis on the hair, the face, and its features. And this is due to the color blocking with the monochromatic backgrounds, as well as the article of clothing that are flattened and have very subtle definition. And it provides this really powerful effect in centering the viewer's attention towards the eyes of the portrait, which carries so much detail and emotion. Essentially, this exhibition is all about the face. It truly is.
yeah.
Here we have Soul and Oscar. With Casper and Elliot D. Is there anything else you'd like to say about this exhibition?
Well, no, apart from it being an amazing experience.
That's good enough.
It's great. No, it was good. It's really nice to sort of revisit these images. To be honest, it's really great to see them again. So
I'm sure you've come a long way since then. And that being said, your next exhibition with the gallery was early 2024 um, in New York,
yeah,
and also had the opportunity to visit this exhibition, and it was profound. I had to see it a few weekday mornings in order to be alone in the space because otherwise it was packed, mostly during the week and the weekends. And these paintings are the largest ones to date. They are massive, one just being over 200 and by 250 centimeters or 80 by 100 inches. These are old master size, where the earlier works and the accused and the immigrants are again mostly 13 by 18 centimeters, 5 by 7 inches.
yeah,
So there's again quite a change in scale. And I hope I'm not giving away too much here, but there's no use of projectors. There's no blown up photographs. You're typically working from an image that may not even fill a single sheet of computer paper. Um, and I'm curious, when you're working on a large canvas, it's much more physical. You're making larger strokes than with the smaller works, which are really incidental and intimate. Can you discuss how you conceive your proportions for your paintings? And I guess the second part of that question is, what challenges do you face when painting the human figure in these scales in general?
yeah. I mean, I usually do. It depends really. I'll
Mhm.
if the photograph I think is right, I will make a grid, a very simple grid on the photograph, and then try and upscale that. And but often I'll make a pencil drawing from a photograph if I want to change the sort of angle of a face or to make sure that the sort of gaze is looking at us. So I might make a few sort of changes to that, and then make a very
Executive
simple,
decision.
yeah, make a little simple line drawing, and then grid that up. Um, but to be fair, to be honest with you, I mean, I literally do the most basic drawing on the linen, literally just to sort of position the features and get the angles right. But all of that drawing just disappears under the first coat of paint and the ground. And for me, it's just all about building that up with paint. And also, it doesn't really matter to me overly if things become slightly distorted or move away from reality. That's sort of, I'm sort of quite interested in the idea of the intersection between the truth and the fiction side of things. So I think that all plays into, you know, the idea of being human, and there's sort of, you know, so they're not meant to be overtly real. So
right. So the under drawings are essentially a loose roadmap that you mentioned are not visible in the finished work. So they essentially do guide the process, knowing that you will take I don't want to say liberties, but a chance here and there with the restructuring of a facial feature, what have you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really change the features particularly, but I might
the gaze.
I might just make sure that the angle is working right, so that the gaze is met. Basically, that's really important. And I sort of edit out sometimes clothing or accessories. I never add anything that isn't there, but I might, you know, there is a point in the process where the idea of the painting takes over for me, and there's a balance that I look for and a weight to the work. So if things are looking beyond that or not quite working in that with that formal language, then I will edit bits out.
Can you discuss the genesis of the exhibition title, Tilted, and how does that relate to the portraits that are included in this exhibition? For example, right now we're looking at Henry.
Yeah. So the title Tilted comes from the song Tilted by Christine and the Queens, which is, first of all, like a brilliant.
I don't know that one. I'm going to listen to that later. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. It's
I feel guilty saying that to you. I don't know that
song. It's a really brilliant song, and it's a song that I use in the studio quite a lot. So if I'm first thing in the morning when I'm setting up, getting everything ready in the studio, I play music, and this is a piece that a song that I play over and over again. It's brilliant. I also read an article released at the time, written by Redcar as they're known now, but sort of the description of creating Christine as a writing technique, a stage character which enabled them to be stronger and create a persona. And in the interview, they talked about describing Tilted as a queer song, about embracing who you are and finding your balance. If you hear the lyrics, you sort of really understand why.
I'll report back to you.
And then they said, you know, it's about being playful with your identity and about shape-shifting. And that felt very sort of resonant to the work that I was making. And for this show in particular, I'd read an article, an essay by Andrew Solomon, who on the dandy, looking at the dandy through history, basically, sort of from Beau Brummel to Oscar Wilde. And I was just thinking of the ideas of, you know, the dandy would have done a promenade to sort of show themselves off, and it just, you know, the idea of our oversharing society now, where everything is, you know, shared. So it just felt like a very keen link to make that. And I was just wondering of, you know, what would the dandy of today look like? And so that sort of led on to this, really.
And we can see that example right here with Pink Elliot,
Yeah,
2023,
yeah,
200 by 250 centimeters, a little larger than 78 by 98 inches. Um, and thank you for sharing all of that background and different inspirations for the exhibition title, because it is very, um, ad, it's very true in the sense that you're bringing the eccentricities of today's youth, dandy, to life. And it's portrayed in these rosy cheeks against manly, rosy backgrounds. These subjects convey a contemporary charm while equally looking or appearing timeless. This particular exhibition has more emphasis on the garments than the previous portraits. Uh, as I mentioned in the London exhibition, they were slightly color blocked and flattened. And we've actually moved past a slightly um, cropped shoulder composition to the shoulders um, and moved nearly to the waistline for some of these portraits.
yeah.
And as much as you are curious and want to identify with these subjects, you feel slightly cut off from them, as in, I'm not in their realm. At least that's how I felt, because they look heightened, perhaps because of their dress, the scale. To me, they almost come off as royalty because they're so regal. But again, they're very similar themes and feelings towards the timelessness, and again, to old master paintings. Close enough to encounter, but slightly at a distance. Um, all that being said, I think there's a beautiful balance with all of your paintings, and they all relate to another. Um, some different in weight, and I was curious of how you determine when to stop layering paint and allow the surface to settle. Is it based on an intuitive sense? Is it more technical decision involving the relationship between the linen and the underlying drawing and the layers of oil paint that you're building up?
It's a purely intuitive, to be honest
Mm-hmm.
with you. Truly, sort of very much. Yeah, I mean, I don't even go into each painting with a particular how it will look, apart from, sort of working out the scale and maybe starting with a vague idea of a color palette. It really all happens very intuitively. Um, I mean, I think when you're working on a body of work like this, and there's, you probably could get about 3 or 4 in the studio at the same time. There is
Right.
that amazing conversation that happens between them, and that will sort of help the idea of them all fitting together. But really, it is purely an instinctive thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these paintings are made on the slightly rougher canvas linen that I was talking about,
Right.
uh, and I feel that they sort of are quite they have quite a different feel. Really, there are sort of passages within the work that you can really see and feel the linen showing through, and I'm just really sort of concerned with that idea that the linen is the surface and the paint might seep into it and
Mm-hmm.
things. So I guess that for me, when you talk about the weight, is when that feels like I've met the idea of that it feels like that's it, it's fairly balanced. So
Right. Here we have Bond from 2023. Um, you slightly approached this idea with the answer you just gave, but I am curious of when this could also be intuitive, but when you do decide to use more tactile methods versus a structured approach to your work, because there is these various approaches you have with the brush, with rubbing, with the rougher linen or the finer linen that allows you to achieve these very nuanced features. We can actually see that with Declan here, Declan and Simone Rocha with Eddie,
Yeah,
beautiful
the
Eddie. There's nuanced features such as the rosy cheeks, the shiny nose, the glassy wet eyes. So again, with the tactile methods versus the more structured approach of maybe that is the framing of the body and the features with the underline drawing. Do you feel that certain features or aspects of a portrait require more emotional or physical engagement in your process?
I'm not sure that I really think of it in those terms.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think the features and the eyes are obviously for me the anchor for the paintings. And I've been sort of experimenting more with the softness in the garments and the clothing. I think I talked about the balance and the weight within, and for me that always has to be the balance. I mean,
Right.
the rosy cheeks are obviously exaggerated in a lot of the work, but then a lot of the people I'm painting do sort of have exaggerated makeup as well. So, it's usually the case that that's something that um, is a starting point, but then I've sort of exaggerated it slightly. And for this particularly, the idea of the dandy, that those features, those accessories would have been exaggerated, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's just my view of that really. I mean, I think you can't really see it in this painting, but the uh, the the garments that in the Simone Rocha dress that he's wearing
Mm-hmm.
are basically it's almost the bare linen that you can see, and I use that to just create the idea of this voluminous dress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think um, I just quite like the idea of passages being fairly abstract, really, as well, so that it's not
Mm-hmm.
overly described. It's quite interesting how little you can, how little the marks you can make that can actually go on to describe something. So
Well said. Thank you. Um, and with that utilization of the linen and balancing with the paint, you've established certain boundaries and parameters for yourself, um, many of which are consistent throughout your years of working. And one I find particularly powerful is the use of the chromatic color planes, which further enhance details of the subject's style, um, which we can see here with, excuse me, Elliot, or with Elliot, but also predominantly here with Pink Elliot and Declan again. Um, do these monochromatic backgrounds you set your subjects and carry more information about them? I know we only give so much information of who they are with their name, but does it say something about a time, a season? Is it something in their clothing or hair or eyes that enforces that color choice? And just in general, with Declan and Pig Elliot, what else could you share about these particular paintings? Because I know these were um, monumentous works for you in terms of completing.
yeah, I mean, I think the painting of Declan was a real, I consider it a breakthrough piece for me. It was the first piece on the new linen that I talked about, the rougher
Mm-hmm.
linen. And also it was the first painting of this scale that I'd made, and it felt like I was really exploring new ways of making the work. I felt that I could get a greater depth with actually using fewer brushstrokes, or there's just something about it that it felt like a real breakthrough piece. So Declan is somebody that I've painted a few times, and I met them in a shop in London, and we've uh, created a relationship. So, and then the Pink Elliot is a friend of my daughter's, and he is often at our house, and sort of a lovely family friend, really. So he's,
Lovely.
yeah.
Well, as we've been discussing, portraiture changes with the climate of the time. And when I see your paintings or think of them. I believe more than ever that highlighting people's style, cultural differences encourages us to build these bridges of understanding. And I think cheers to all that makes us unique. And again, you typically do not provide more information than the sitter's name, Declan Pink Elliott. And viewers will come to these paintings with an open mind. And I think with any sort of art, when viewers are uninformed or not guided, they tend to project. And since a majority of people who will see a portrait may be unfamiliar with that individual, their history, their likes, their idiosyncrasies, what feelings would you say you were trying to convey overall, or what is a hope someone will learn from looking at your work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any firm ideas about what people may feel when they look at the work. But I think it's about visibility. It's making people visible. And for me, I guess I just want to make work that speaks of today and that might be a record of the times now, people that are living now. That feels important.
I agree.
Celebratory. I really hope they're celebratory.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if someone could find another way to look at them. As I mentioned, you're in Cornwall. Specifically, your studio is in St. Ives, which I had the pleasure of visiting. And in St. Ives, there are monumental institutions such as the Tate, the Barbara Hepworth Museum, and Sculpture Garden. It was the epicenter of the first half of the 20th century. And from what I learned, it wasn't until the summer of 1877, which was the opening of the train line, the St. Ives, the St. Earth, which was the single most important factor in the development of the artistic community there and the growth of mass tourism. That line essentially connected St. Ives to the rest of the country, enabling visitors to spread the word. Artists began to frequent and paint because of the light, and the light is extraordinary. It was something people were telling me, and then it didn't make sense until I actually got there. Modernist British artists such as Ben Nicholson, Sandra Blow, Patrick Heron, Terry Frost, Wilhelmina Barnes Graham, Francis Bacon, and of course, Barbara Hepworth were there and were also working at that time. And I mention all of this because where we live and where we work has such an effect on our perspectives and a general self of well-being and the idea of self. And especially if there is such a long history of a place that is so creative and just so beautifully natural and also made with the community there. So I'm curious of what is it about the Cornish landscape that influences your work? Maybe it's not so directly the sea line and the massive rocks. If it's not necessarily from the forms and the shapes and the textures, perhaps it's the atmosphere, the light. Curious.
Yeah, well, it is exactly that. There's the light. There's the idea of so much art history surrounding me. So in the studio that I'm working in now, which is right on the beach at Porthmeor, such a fantastic art history and collection of people that have worked there before. I think having the Tate around the corner is brilliant, and the Barbara Hepworth Museum. But I think you know, and being surrounded by so many people making great work, there's a lot of people in such a small place. But I think the idea of the landscape being so vast and dramatic and wonderful only sort of serves as a sort of reminder of literally how small we are, and and that very human feeling of living in this amazing place, but sharing the world. It's that sort of existential feeling of making you realize how small and human you are, really.
I would say that it does that very well. For the short time I was there, I felt very small. And it was refreshing in so many ways. And yes, plenty of culture to keep you entertained. And the history is very much in the air. Um, so as an artist, there is a constant morphology, a shift and growth on your physical plane of creating, but also emotionally and conceptually as well. And I'm curious of how you see yourself at this time growing as an artist.
Yeah, I think I find it hard to separate myself.
Mhm.
Me as artist to me is me. Uh, I just think that, well, basically, life brings its challenges and changes, and all of these feed into the world and into the work, and then hopefully that will continue. Uh, and all of those makes big differences to you, and alter
Mhm.
who you are, and just I think with age comes the idea that you're still learning so much. It's not a there's still so much to do, I guess.
Well, look forward to seeing what it is you do. Um, is there a particular subject or group that you are investigating at the moment that you're looking towards? Can you share what your paintings for your upcoming Shanghai exhibition will feature?
Yeah, the paintings for Shanghai are going to be basically a continuation of the work I've been making at the moment. So the work that was in New York, it's sort of a continuation of that. Um, but then at the same time, I'm beginning to do research into the world of drag. A couple of the people that I've been painting over the years have drag personas, and so I've been looking at them and into that world as well. So um,
Yes,
that
we have one.
is such a fantastic art form, really. And yeah, so this painting
Emma.
of Emma is sort of like the very first of those that I'm exploring really at the moment. This painting was
Fantastic.
made for an exhibition called The Infinite Woman that was at the Foundation Carmagnac of the south of France,
Mhm.
curated by Alona Pardo. So yeah, so this is the very first of those sort of the next thing.
I did some research on drag, and I believe I came to realize that it has theatrical origins, and the dresses men wore when they played female characters often would drag on the floor. But then
Yeah,
the term drag queen, I believe, came out of New York City in the 50s and would refer to differentiate the amateurs performing drag and the professional female impersonators who made a living
ah,
from performing drag. So, but also there was another meaning, and it could have also been applied to men who chose to wear women's clothing on the streets. An act at that time was illegal in New York.
yeah,
Um, so I know we have Emma here from 2024. And again,
yeah.
this is another massive painting. It is 160 by 200 centimeters, so a little over 63 by 78 inches. Um, I say this because drag queens vary by type and in certain cultures. How are the drag queens you're looking into special or different in any way?
Um, well, I don't know whether they are different in any way, but I mean, this is Emma. She's a female drag queen,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also just beginning sort of tentatively to look at the King's scene as well. So I think that's, you know, it's going to be very interesting. But yeah, I don't know whether they're particularly special. I mean, I think the idea of drag is it's sort of a growing phenomenon in a way. But for me, it's sort of an amazing art form. It sort of connects cabaret and comedy and couture and theatre and music. It's brilliant.
I would agree. It is brilliant. Um, there are a few comments in the chat, not so many questions that we haven't covered. Seems we did a good job of that, but there is one particular comment I will read. Saw the Tilted exhibition in New York City. Exquisite work, a must-see in person. I love the scale plays such an important role in your work. The loss of edges is wonderful. Shirts disappear into the background hues of very similar value. Your beach photos of a town show a hazy lost boundaries perspective. Thrilled I could see these in person. Thank you for your time. Very rewarding to listen. Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
That's very kind on both ends.
Thank you.
Well, I have to ask, Sarah, are you going to take a crack at a self-portrait anytime soon?
I am actually. I am.
Yes.
Yeah. I think maybe a series of them. I think.
All right.
Yeah, that's coming up.
All right. You heard it here first, people. Look out for that. Excellent. Sarah, thank you so much. I really sincerely appreciate the time and the energy you've spent away from painting to speak with me today. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's really great to see you again, and you're welcome at the studio anytime. And just to say thank you to Jane and Lydia as well for their work.
Yes.
On
and thank you to Jonathan Horrocks and Amelia Good at Stephen Freeman Gallery for their assistance as well and making this conversation happen.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much. Looking forward to coming back and to visit you, hopefully sooner than later.
Brilliant.
Until then, take care.
And you. Thank you.